Good afternoon, everyone, and greetings to those of you who are tuning in for our live stream. Welcome to this panel discussion on Better Living, Zero Waste, co-hosted by the World Economic Forum and Fortune magazine. As we all know, Asia is the world's biggest producer of food and manufactured goods with a massive consumer base. But this growth comes with a cost, as this region's greenhouse gas emissions and the waste that we produce continue to rise. That is why concerted efforts to design more sustainable production model and to shift consumer behavior are underway. So in today's discussion, we will explore how government and business leaders can work together to build an ecosystem to invest in innovative technologies and to promote responsible consumption. So a very brief self-introduction. My name is Fang Wang. I am the executive Shanghai duty editor at Fortune. I'm thrilled to be moderating this conversation. We have an excellent and incredibly diverse panel here today with us, featuring voices from across the public and private sectors and from a wide range of industries. Before we dive in, I just want to remind our audience here and online that if you want to post any content and thoughts on social media, please use the hashtag AMNC23, which stands for Annual Meeting of New Champions 23. Now let me briefly introduce our distinguished panelists. To my immediate left is Ms. Pullman Low, Vice Chairman and Managing Director, Regal Hotels International, which is one of the largest hotel brands in Greater China. To her left is Gilly Wang, Chief Executive, Hong Kong Consumer Council, the Hong Kong government body charged with consumer rights protection. To her left is Stuart Oda, Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Alaska Life, an agriculture technology company. To his left is Mr. Martin Weiss, Chief Executive Officer, Hubert Burda Media, one of Germany's largest media and technology companies. To his left is Mr. Tilmin Cheng, Chief Executive Officer, Sino-Singapore Tianjin Ecosystem Investment and Development Company, which I think is an intergovernment partnership between Singapore and China. A warm welcome to all of you. I want to turn to you first, Gilly, because we all know companies and the government, of course, play a crucial role in sustainable growth, which we'll cover a lot afterwards. But I want to come to you first because consumers are at the center of this big cause. When we say better living, it's better living for them. And without their participation, without their awareness, nothing can be done. So you work for the Hong Kong Consumer Council. So how do you design a program that raises consumers' awareness as part of your mission to give them, to protect their rights? Is awareness part of their rights?
Oh, definitely. You know, for any consumption, when you talk about whether it's sustainable or not sustainable, that involves a marketplace. In a marketplace, there are two big players. One on one side, obviously, is the trader. The other side is the consumer. And of course, surrounding it, there are requires regulations and other stakeholders. But any imbalance of it, will create problems or maybe disruptions, no matter it's good or bad, to the whole marketplace. So one of the very important things to safeguard consumers is maintaining this balance. And going back to consumer rights, we are talking about very fundamental rights. They are talking about the safety of the products. We are talking about affordability. We are talking about whether they're sustainable means environmental friendliness, their rights to have information access, and also, in case of any problem, the right to redress. So these are very important rights to consumers. So when we, no matter it's at the international level or maybe at the local level, to design a program to maintain this balance. One aspect of it is consumer education. Apart from advocating for the right regulations to protect, to regulate the market, advocating for the right behavior for the trade, consumer education play a very big part because they have to empower themselves to be rational, logical, and sensible in their decision making and in every purchase. So no matter you're talking about clothing, food, green products, or maybe electrical items, whatever you think of, in a household, if they have that education, if they have that knowledge, that would be far more easier in protecting them. Because if they can protect themselves, the dispute will seldom comes. But if they don't, the dispute will come easily. So in terms of approach, there are many ways, to do it. Using Hong Kong Consumer Council as an example, we put a lot of emphasis on information dissemination. So in our work, we have a very famous Choice magazine every month that we release product test results of many different kinds of products, giving all the tips, to consumers when they make the purchase. Apart from that, we put forward very big education programs targeting from the primary school all the way to secondary school, the vulnerable ones, including the mentally handicapped, together with the elderly. These are more vulnerable groups to help them, to educate themselves. Furthermore, just in case, any dispute to happen, we have a very big team in the market to conciliate different disputes. So every year, in terms of numbers, we're handling around 70,000 inquiries and 30,000 complaints every year, just trying to, help to resolve all the disputes. Our resolution rate is about 70%, which is not bad already. But this is the last things, we want to do because we want happy transaction. We want to have a very sustainable and balanced economy, but things will not be that ideal. So that's why, we need to have that very strong dispute resolution mechanism. And at the higher level, globally, we are working on many advocacies to international bodies as well as governments. If you're talking about food, we are working closely with UN, the United Nations, at Consumers International, which is the World Federations of 200 members from 100 countries.
That's actually what I'm going to dive into. Can you share with us a little bit about the sustainable food program that you were initiating?
Sure. Sustainable food, we are all human beings. I'm sure we rely on food to survive. If we don't have good food, a healthy food, probably that create a lot of problem to our healthcare system, as well as the productivity of any economy. So food is very important. But unfortunately, it is not that ideal as well because we are facing the cost of living crisis and also the imbalance, the broken system of food. So at the international level, Consumers International are working with many major bodies like the UN. We are part of the UN food system dialogue. We are also in the crisis committee as well to look into the Ukraine war, how it impacts, the food supply worldwide. And we are advocating for the balancing of the trade as well as the innovation of technology so that, the consumers can have more affordable, safe system for that. And at the market level, Consumers International also working closely with different agencies on consumer education about healthy diet. So going back to Hong Kong, one example that I quote before I close is, in the past 3 years, we doubled the resources on food tests. So we have probably around 35 tests conducted covering 1,300 samples. That create a lot of noise. Whatever you can think of, from coffee, infant formula, all the way to canned foods or even superfood, goji berries, which is very popular right now. We test everything so that we offer informed information to consumers. That create lots of interest in the market because the findings were striking. No one have the idea about coffee can be carcinogenic because of the acrylamides. So if you're a coffee drinker, addicted to it, you better stop or maybe slow down. Stuff like that, it's associated with the livelihood of people. They will concerned, they will be interested. That's how, we empower them to behave better in their healthy diet. So at the end of the day, we generate a lot of media attention, not only in Hong Kong, but also in China as well. Talking about 6,000 media coverage, and inside that is about 60 headline news. So by going through, something that is highly relevant to consumers about their daily living, apart from the policy level, that will help to drive, better empowerment to consumers.
Well, I want to bring in an innovator in the food industry. Stuart, Alaska Life is pioneering some of the cutting-edge agriculture technologies. When we talked last time in the preparation of this panel, I heard some fascinating data, statistics, how vertical farming can increase the efficiency and also the nutrition of food. Can you share with us a bit more?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. Maybe I'll build on what Gilly said, but I guess overall, in order to build a more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive food system, the agriculture industry and our company's focus is how can the industry make things more both affordable but also accessible. And so local sustainable food production needs to do a lot of work in order to make it easy for the consumer to make a decision. So food that is safer, healthier, and hopefully just as affordable. And so our company is focused kind of in two key areas. First, we build a turnkey vertical farm for customers that are looking to localize food production. So if it makes both economic and environmental sense, we want to help customers localize the food production. And then on kind of the smart side of things, we develop farm management software and AI-enabled IoT devices to take conventional farms and really maximize their productivity and efficiency. And kind of the result of that on the vertical farming side, because we're able to control so many aspects of production, we're able to reduce the water, the land, and fertilizer use by up to 99%. We don't require any chemical pesticides, and we don't need any GMOs. We've also, vertical farming is very bright. You see a lot of LEDs, and so the conventional kind of thought is that it's very energy intensive, but we've completed a very simple environmental impact study, and we found that we can reduce carbon emissions per kg by up to 24% compared to imported fresh produce products. And so, agricultural logistics is a huge emitter of carbon. And by localizing food production, by giving consumers the option, the access, and the affordability to be able to purchase things that are local and more sustainable, we can also have a meaningful impact in reducing carbon emissions. And kind of the last thing is really to scale up the technology and really to democratize it. We have to take a lot of the specialized know-how out of the equation. And to that end, we're building one of the largest image data sets so that our AI models can understand plant health at a very kind of molecular photosynthetic level. And the goal here is that if we can make food production not only accessible from a product perspective, but from a profession. So if anybody can enter the space, just like you might work at a McDonald's or a fast food restaurant, that anybody could be a successful commercial farmer, that we can really meaningfully scale up sustainable food production. And we can make it possible for more communities around the world to be in charge of their own food and nutritional security. So we're putting a lot of these efforts into these tool sets that we can deploy. A lot of our focus is actually in developing markets. So we're in China, we're in the Middle East. The kind of first developed market that we're entering is Japan. But trying to make these tools available and affordable and accessible for individuals and businesses that are operating in developing countries.
Can you give us an example? Like, you go to a building, right? It's the vertical farming, like you work with a hotel, for example. How do you do it? Yeah, so our kind of maybe unique contribution to the industry is that our installations are incredibly flexible and they're modular. So if you have an open space, an underutilized parking structure, we've converted into a vertical farm before. We've integrated our indoor farms into restaurant corners and cafes. And so really any space where food is consumed, we can produce it locally as well. And so we really want to empower not just kind of this debate around consumer versus producer, but to be able to think about food being integrated into the cityscape in ways that hasn't existed in the past. And so right now we're doing a lot of discussions around integrating into residential communities, co-locating with supermarkets, integrating into hotels and other operations. And also kind of now more and more having food be kind of something that can co-locate with both educational facilities, so schools, as well as rehabilitation centers. So as part of somebody's mental and physical therapy, that they might be able to use indoor farming as a way to not only produce food for their local community, but to get from their well-being's perspective as well. So if I were a restaurant owner and I want to use your technology, does it require a lot of capital? Yeah, so from that perspective, we have multiple models that we can work with. So if a customer doesn't have kind of the upfront capital, there's ways for us to finance the technology so that they can just integrate it into their operations. If they don't want to farm, we can provide the operational kind of support as well. Right now, what's really exciting is last year we matched the capital and operational
we match the operational and capital cost parity to glass houses. And this year, we're confident with a small variety of vegetables that will match the efficiency of a greenhouse. And next year, in developed markets, we'll match the efficiency of a field farm. And so what's really exciting about the technology is it's very exponential. And we're very confident that if you're purchasing imported fresh produce, that by localizing the production, we can reduce your costs.
Right. So can you tell us a bit more about the nutrition increase with vertical farming?
Yeah, I mean, nutrition is really kind of a direct function of freshness. So if something is fresh, most often that's going to have much more nutritional value. One of the ways in which we are also kind of increasing nutritional value is because we can control all aspects of production, we can apply stress to the plants in a way that really maximizes nutritional value as well. So we can simulate drought conditions, flood conditions, extreme darkness and high winds, and all these different stress, kind of both mechanical stress and these kinds of environmental stress that we can provide, can get the plant to react in ways that can become more nutritious. We can also change everything from the taste and texture as well. So customers that want something that's sweeter or spicier or softer, these are all things that we can do as well. And this is kind of also a way in which we can tailor our solutions to restaurants and hotels, but also a way for us to also contribute to things like reducing food waste.
Sounds fascinating. So we do have a representative from the hotel industry, Pullman. So the hotel industry is going to have a boom time after the post-pandemic era. So I'm sure you're ready for that. But at Regal Hotel, you put sustainability at the core of your operation. So could you share with us a little bit like details how you do to save water, energy, reduce food waste? What do you do?
Sure. As you say, we actually do embrace sustainability at the core because we feel that it's not just time to talk about it, but actually translate it into action. So we actually launched the first carbon neutral hotel called iClub 13 years ago. That's before, I guess, everyone started talking about ESG. And the way we did it was to really start with measuring the baseline. Because first you have to be aware of the impact that you are causing to this earth. So we did that by engaging professional consultants and also building our in-house team to really look at exactly how we're affecting the world with our operations. And then we offset the remaining emissions. And I have to say that through these years, we have found that technology can really play a huge role. So in terms of energy management solutions, there have been more and more very advanced AI-powered systems that we can leverage on to really drive energy efficiency. And in fact, the more we can embrace big data and AI, the more we are able to predict energy consumption. And actually, a lot of people are under the misconception that you have to sacrifice your bottom line. But in fact, when you're willing to invest in upfront, there are very clear savings. Easily, you can save up to 20%. Above that, perhaps there's some diminishing returns, but still, we have to make sure that we are on this path to net zero. And in terms of water management, also there are very efficient systems that can help conserve water by predicting, again, consumption, and also, some faucets can actually deliver the same type of flow without using as much water. And in terms of waste management, globally, the hotel industry actually throws away 100 billion worth of food. This is actually an alarming statistic in that, in fact, 9 million people are still dying of hunger every year. A child dies of hunger every 10 seconds. And yet we, as in the more developed countries, are throwing away all this wasted food because, again, I think we can do a better job in predicting food consumption. For example, there are some IoT technologies that we can use to install in the kitchens or even in restaurants to measure, the amount of food that is thrown away, and in that way we can better manage our inventory and also optimize our purchasing systems and also optimize the portion that we serve to our customers and also better plan our menu offerings. So also for waste management, there's a lot of very innovative technologies out there. This year we entered into a partnership with the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology to develop a revolutionary bricks technology that actually uses a combination of food waste and construction waste to produce eco-friendly bricks that are actually 12 times harder than the original bricks. And 1 ton can actually absorb 2 tons of carbon. So again, there are many ways that we can reduce the impact of our operations. And this year we are also working with some international organizations to define the standards for net zero hotel operation. I think there are a number of green building standards out there, but instead of just focusing on the hardware, actually consumer behavior can make a huge difference. And that's where we can actually help with operation management. For example, at the university, there's a sustainable living solution that actually simply installs smart meters in the dormitories. So actually sometimes it doesn't involve rocket science. All it takes is awareness and the determination to actually minimize our impact. So by simply installing the meters, the students are able to reduce their energy consumption by over 60%. So again, I think as long as we are aware that we are obviously the source of the problem, but we can also be the solution.
On that note, can I come back to Gilly just very briefly? So we all know Hong Kong is the paradise, like for cuisine, right? So, but how do you design a program to educate the consumers about the food waste in particular, to reduce food waste? Is there, any specific measures that you take?
Yes, we do. In actual fact, that requires a very collaborative efforts with the civil society, with the government, and also education to educate the people that, how much you need. Sometimes, you're just too greedy, to eat more, but in reality, you don't need that much. So no matter it's the restaurants industries, in the past, we have 8-course menu, we are advocating for only 6 course, and also environmentally unfriendly food, we get rid of that, trying to make people understand, what is healthy for them. I do believe that, COVID did make a difference to people. Sometimes this kind of global crisis, make people self-reflect again, their behavior, whether it is right for the environment and right for their wellness. So it's getting more and more healthy. And when you talk about healthy, if you offer them the right information and also make it affordable to them, the behavior will come. But of course, that's still not the most ideal situation right now because people are still halfly educated, and also affordability is one thing as well. Plus sometimes, greenwashing is another issue that globally we have to address. No matter it's greenwashing or green ESG washing, those are the issues that we have to work with. So there are many things we have to do, but fundamentally the education of the right, impartial, accurate, and precise information to them and easy to understand to the public is very crucial for them to gradually change their behavior. And according to our sustainable consumption behavior study, making it accessible is very important, and have the choices in the market is very important. The green labeling right now is an issue as well, so that's why we are also working very hard, to look at the accuracy and the comprehensiveness of label, pinpointing different traders on how they could improve, because sometimes it's just because of cost saving. They seldom review their nutrition label and also the information on the label, which is not undesirable. So we are also pinpointing that. By matching that, offering the right tools and information to consumers, they will gradually change.
Right, and I think on that note, it's a good timing to bring on the representative from the media industry. Martin, you work for this German media company called Berda, which I think publishes a lot of titles on food. Is that right?
That is absolutely right. We're the world's largest publisher of food magazines, yes.
Right, so Gilly just talked about how we should convey the message in an accurate way, right? And I think media, plays a key role in this. So can you share with us your insights in some of the new trends in food industry, technologies, innovations, and perhaps consumers' behavior around food?
Yeah, there's 2 different perspectives I'd like to draw upon after hearing about sort of regulation and production. Now we come to the fun part, the cooking, and actually eating. So we're very close to the meal now, everyone. So that's one perspective. The other is maybe a distinctly European perspective, which might be different to the Asian perspective that we're seeing. So look, 30, 40 years ago, it was all about diversity in food, right? So the Brits had their shepherd pie and the Germans were eating their sausage, and suddenly everybody was getting interested in food. And suddenly it was about international cuisine, it was about discovering the world. And then eventually, the topic of health started to matter. So the question is, what is it that you eat? We all remember Super Size Me. We all remember debates about healthy nutrition. And this is sort of the early 2000s when that was the big trend. And then I guess it was sort of from the in the 20 teens when the whole question of your carbon footprint really started to matter. And it was all about getting food that is very locally produced. It's fresh, locally produced food. And I guess that is where we currently are. It now sort of develops into a new topic, which is longevity, where people are saying, I can really use food to lengthen my life and lead a healthy, happy life, hopefully ever after. Now, food alone isn't going to get you there. But that is sort of the trend in which we're going. I think what you said is absolutely right. The consumer matters massively because, yes, we need industrial solutions to the problems that we see to be able to react. But at the end of the day, we have consumer decisions. And if the consumers accept plastic wrapping, low nutritional value, stuff being shipped around half the world, and really, really cheap food, and all of that in combination, we will never get the problem solved. So there will need to be some sort of education, and you can do it from a public policy perspective, as I guess you guys do. But I think you can also do it from a narrative, from the storytelling, because it's actually quite something positive, and people love to engage with it. So there's already a lot of consumer awareness, and food magazines, for example, unlike other magazines, are actually not decreasing in print run, they're actually increasing in print run. Food has become an ever more central part to our lives. And around food waste, I mean, let me just give you one example. We are a media and tech company. We also invest in internet ventures, and one of a very successful venture that we have is in the UK, a company called Oddbox. What they do is they fight food waste right at the start. So they basically take produce that will never make it to the supermarket just for optical reasons. They package that into a box and send it on a weekly basis to consumers. So food waste is actually reduced at the source before it actually hits the cycle. So those, I think, are two interesting consumer trends that we're seeing.
I thought you were going to share with us with some cooking skills.
We'll do that later, absolutely. Very, very happy. My favorite lasagna recipe after the show.
All right, okay. So let's broaden our discussions a little bit. I want to come to you, Teal. So Tianjin Eco-City is a partnership between Singapore and China. So I think you bring a very unique perspective. You sort of cross the public and the private sectors. So could you tell us a bit more? I think Tianjin Eco-City is about 50 kilometers from... 30 kilometers from... So it's in a coastal area. Essentially, you turned a piece of wasteland into a very livable area for living, I mean, for Tianjin residents. So tell us, how you did it? What's it like now?
First, some background. As the G2G, government-to-government project, this is quite unique. Singapore and China has got a few G2G projects over the last few decades. Tianjin Eco-City was started in 2008. If you recall, those were the times when China was a big concern about air pollution, water pollution, food security, and so on.
It started in 2008. That was where all the discussions were about air pollution.
And when they look at Singapore, Singapore is economically very vibrant, a very small place, but at the same time, it has a lot of respect for the environment, has done a lot for environmental protection, preservation, and so on. And therefore, the idea between the leaders of the two countries at the time was, why not find a place, develop a city to show that we can grow economically while protecting and preserving the environment. And to make it even more challenging, we chose a place in the eastern corner of Tianjin that is essentially wasteland and polluted waters at the time, with only just some fishermen. So we took the place. So a lot of things were done in the last 15 years. You rehabilitated the land. We cleaned up the waters. We took the urban planning lessons from various parts of the world, including Singapore, and planned the city so that it is a very livable, very green, very sustainable city. For instance, one of the KPIs that we have is that every resident in EcoCity should be within 5 minutes of walking distance to a park. And there are many park connectors connecting the various parks. We make sure there are greenery. We make good use of the rivers and the lakes. And we have planted a lot of trees. So today, the Tianjin EcoCity is, I would say, very successful. One of the more livable cities in China. We have many young families and also older folks because of the environment and the air and the water. So I think the demonstration here was that you can grow economically, you can make it into a nice living environment while also taking care of the greenery and the nature. And I think that was done. So in the last 15 years, we have, as a company, we have 3 roles. First, we are the platform between the 2 governments. So there are many things in the development of the city that depends on the government and not just the company. So we have drawn in resources from the Chinese government, from the Singapore government. So for instance, in the early planning, we draw in experts who have dealt with pollution issues in Singapore and in China to do the rehabilitation. We brought in the urban planning experts to do the planning of the city. We brought in the people who are concerned about sustainability to set up a series of KPIs on how to have a sustainable city and so on. So that's the first role, being a platform to bring resources from both governments to make the city a livable place. The second role is to develop some of the buildings in the city. So we are a developer of residential properties, we are a developer of industrial properties, of commercial properties. And we are halfway through this project. We have got more land to develop. The third role is really to operate some of these facilities. So we're operator of some industrial facilities and some commercial facilities.
Right. So we will come to the expansion plan afterwards, but I'm just wondering whether you bring in private capital into this project, and how does the private sector, collaborate with the government? Because we all know, the ecosystem where everybody is involved is really important in the sustainable growth. And also because only when you have private sector participating in, you probably can have a more sustainable business model, right? If you want to scale it, in the context of urbanization, which a lot of Asian countries are still going through. So how does the private and public sectors work together?
For the G2G projects between Singapore and China, I think one of the unique things that Singapore government always insists on is that the project should be supported by the government with a vision that was set up by the government, but it should be implemented and executed by the private sector. Yeah. So in the case of Tianjin, a joint venture was set up between a Singapore consortium and a Chinese consortium. On the Singapore side, it is led by Keppel Corporation, which is one of the listed companies in Singapore. So it is purely private sector driven in that sense, in terms of the capital injection, in terms of the implementation. And to draw in other resources, we will have joint ventures with other companies. So we have drawn in investors from Korea, from Japan, from the Philippines, and so on, to do the development. So that's how we make use of private sector funding, investment acumen, and maybe private sector expertise, while at the same time drawing upon the government's experience in terms of larger picture issues, urban planning and so on and so forth.
Right. So very quickly, has it been a commercially successful story?
Yes, it has been. It has been. Yes.
Good to know. So I want to come back to you, Gilly, a little bit, because we do have a zero waste part of this theme of this panel. So, and we all know plastic waste is a big part of, consumer waste that we produce every day. So share with us a little bit about, how do you reduce plastic waste in Hong Kong?
Wow, this is probably I should start from the global picture first, instead of zooming into Hong Kong. Plastic, to start with, the cost, has been passing on to consumers, unfairly, frankly speaking, because in the first place, if we think through the damage of plastic to the whole environment, if we get rid of it or maybe have the right ingredients, probably, the cost will not be translated to all of us, in this room or all the consumers. So it is quite unfair, right now. But the whole world right now is chasing after time to mitigate the problem. So this is something, very important we have to deal with, because no matter it's the physical plastic that we are touchable, or maybe the microplastic that we're absorbing in our body, in our blood, those are harming us, every day. So at the global level, Consumers International actually is working, is lobbying and negotiating with the UN about a plastic treaty for plastic waste, reduction. It is a huge pollution. So, but the details is in the devil is in the details, because I'm not sure every one of you have the experience of recycling plastic every day, but there are lots of frustration. Whether there's a label to help you to understand whether it's recyclable or not. Secondly is how can you get rid of the labels on the bottle to ensure that it is recyclable. Even after you clean it, how you can put into the right place to ensure your effort will not be waste, it will be properly treated. Stuff like that, if it's not transparent, not properly done, it will frustrate consumers a lot. And at the end, what will happen is they either, okay, I do less, or just give up. For many surveys in the world, saying that, many consumers are very frustrated. So at the global level, in the negotiation of the global treaty, there are a few very important things, that has to be harmonized across the world. The first thing is about the information provision on the label by itself, making sure that it's standardized, that everyone can have an easy understanding on how to follow the instruction and make sure it is right. Second thing is about the definition of green and innovation, because one country, your definition of green versus the other is very different. So that requires a huge harmonization around the world to ensure, this consistency. And thirdly is about, the trade practices as well, because, the replaceable products has to exist. In actual fact, even when we are talking about many replaceable products, in reality, after testing, they are also containing harmful substance to the world. So it's not 100% green in reality. So how we can continuously improve that to make it total green to consumers, that is very important, and that has to be done at the international level. But the local level, of course, every government is chasing after time right now. So one thing is to consistently, persistently, and actively involved in all the government consultations about the policies, advising them, what makes sense to consumers, what are the unclear points, and also about, the incentive to support, consumer behavior to follow, to manage the plastic waste. So this is one area. And another area is, again, consumer education. If every one of us pledge not to touch plastic in your takeaway, in your everyday life, that will make a difference as well. Even taking me, for example, I just stopped, using plastic for my takeaway. I just choose shops or restaurants that allow me to bring my glass container, and then you put, food into my container. Then I would, patronize, that shop. So this is, simple behavior that everyone can behave, but that requires huge amount of effort and education for everyone to follow. And finally, according to the survey we did in Hong Kong, the sharing of success to the public is very important. I don't want to waste my effort. I want to know my effort got reward for the better benefit of the whole community, and best with financial incentive.
Yes.
So if I can get rewarded with certain gift, redemption of green products, green coupons or credits, that I can continuously motivate my behavior, that will be better. So I think, these are the things, that has to be done, no matter it's globally and locally, to drive, plastic reduction. Hopefully one day we don't have to use it at all.
Yeah, on that note, I can particularly relate to, because in China we do have this phenomenon of eating a lot of takeaways, especially during the pandemic. It's becoming a phenomenon. I think it produces a lot of food waste and plastic waste.
So we
both.
have to create that sense of guilt.
Yes, exactly. But there is guilt. But when you said you decided to keep away from them, I think that's very challenging. It takes a lot of determination, right? Because you're basically sacrificing your convenience. So on the note of rewards, financial rewards, I want to bring in Pullman. I heard about this Meta Green project you're doing in Metaverse, I think in Sandbox, is that right?
Yes.
So that offers like a Metaverse version of green hotel, net zero hotel, and you give online to offline rewards. How does it work? Can you share with us?
So the reason I launched Meta Green is because I truly believe in collaboration for change and impact. We live in a very complex world with very urgent challenges to be met. So to go far, we have to go together. That's why I launched this Meta Green, which is the first Web3 green communities, the first green metropolis on Sandbox. And in this green utopian world, we don't just have a green hotel. Rather, we actually have like-minded partners join this ecosystem. Together, we want to foster eco-friendly behavior and reward, as Gillian mentioned, green choices. So what we do is we provide immersive edutainment experiences on the Sandbox, and we have partners such as leading banks, also leading supermarkets, shopping malls, all types of players, so that we together can drive online to offline behavior and also vice versa. It's a decarbonize and earn model that is quite different from just playing and earning.
Just elaborate a little bit more. If I'm a player in Sandbox and I enter your virtual hotel, how do I behave to get rewards?
So one way is in the virtual hotel, then you will experience the latest prop tech inventions, so you will see what a net zero hotel will be like. And then you will go through the hotel and you will learn to minimize your carbon footprint. And then after you go through those experiences, you can redeem an NFT that can allow you to enjoy physical rewards at one of our outlets and hotels. And actually it's vice versa, because we, in our upcoming app, we actually let consumers choose certain behaviors, such as foregoing towel usage or daily housekeeping, and they will be rewarded points that can be stored also in the metaverse.
Right. Just to follow up on that, because we know a lot of consumers already have intention to be more energy and water saving, but sometimes it's a little bit difficult for them to translate that intention into real action. So in the real world, what do you do to make the translation, to give them enough motivation to put real action into green behavior?
For example, this year we are, by the end of this year, we'll go completely plastic free. And the way to do that is also to get the consumers to support this movement. So when they say, okay, I'm not going to use any of the disposable shampoos and body wash and all those amenities, then we give them points. So it's actually very instant, and it's stored in the loyalty program so that they can be rewarded for each and every choice, so that they can be more mindful of the impact of their consumption.
That's great. So we will, in your hotel, have shampoo only in bottles?
In dispensers, yeah.
Okay, all right.
But of course they can still request, but that would be only upon special request.
Okay. Stuart, I want to come back to you, because I think the capital, plays an important role. And in our previous discussion, you said something about like only 1% of investment goes into the agriculture or food industry. That seems a very small number. Tell us why this is the case.
Yeah, I have no data to back up the 1%, but I think right now there's a lot of exponential technologies that are really captivating people's imagination. So like ChatGPT and generative AI is kind of the hot topic right now. And And so there's kind of a disproportionate amount of capital going into these other sectors. I think with agriculture and technology surrounding agriculture, it really requires patient capital. The change happens over a long period of time, but once the change happens, it's a huge paradigm shift. So the efficiencies aren't just an increase of a couple of percentages. We're talking about a 10x, 100x improvement in how things are being done. And so right now, kind of the way in which maybe some of these investors are incentivized to be able to deploy their capital, isn't very conducive to being very patient. But what's really exciting is that there's a huge shift that's happening. If you look at the capital that's being deployed in the space industry and other industries that also require enormously patient capital, they're attracting huge numbers of credible investors. Sovereign wealth funds are investing, family offices are investing, and so the general pool of investors that are looking into ag tech, as a way for them to not only just do good, but also do well, this is actually really picking up a lot of steam. And so, and particularly in Asia, we see a lot of support from family offices, sovereign wealth from the Middle East. And what's, food is one of those things just like water, but it has 100% penetration. Wherever humans exist, there's food. And internet and housing may not exist everywhere, but food definitely does. And so the impact that you can make if you're investing in technology that is really kind of focused on these efficiencies and affordabilities and accessibility can make a huge impact globally. And these things are becoming much easier now with IoT and software and AI to become measurable. So before it was kind of this very nebulous, I'm doing good for the planet. It wasn't really, I'm not really sure how big my impact is. And now it's becoming translatable into not only kind of how many liters of water I'm saving, but also how many dollars I'm also saving the supply chain as well.
Right,
and so a lot of technology across the entire supply chain, from addressing food waste all the way down to kind of the circular economy. So like, what are you going to do with like recycling? All across the supply chain, capital is being deployed. So it's very exciting to see.
So is it fair to say technology has enabled us to perhaps being green while being profitable as well?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
So far, being green is means a lot of expenditure, but as Apoma just said, it already generates a lot of savings, right? So eventually, green can be profitable.
Yeah, now that it's easy to measure, it's really easy to make decisions. So if you have these AI platforms that can measure your food waste and they can understand what's being thrown away, how much of it's being thrown away, how much that costs to produce, then it's translatable into, if we adjust portion sizes, adjust these things. And so on the production side, now that it's becoming much easier to measure resource consumption, labor efficiency, it's directly translating into savings for producers and making the entire sector more efficient. And so,
I would actually add to that. Sorry to interrupt. There is an industry perspective from the cost side on this. There's also a consumer benefit side to it, and consumers are willing to pay.
Sure.
So you shouldn't completely outprice yourself, but at the end of the day, you have a very large group of consumers who are willing to pay for good, sustainable food. And I really like what you say with the app, Pauline, around gamification. We bought a company last year called NutriCheck, based out of Nottingham. What they do is calorie counting in a very gamified way of actually tracking what you eat and of tracking the ingredients of what you eat. And suddenly people become very conscious about their daily lives. And I think we need to get that part of the equation. And yeah, it can be quite scary at times. But what you do is you become much more conscious. And people actually pay for an app like that, a monthly subscription fee. And yes, that is a hugely profitable business because people really care about what they eat, how they feed themselves. And I think we should have that in mind. It's not only about cost and getting very efficient at feeding the masses. It's also creating an awareness that it makes a ton of difference to your personal life, how you feed yourself. And it can actually be a lot of fun tracking that. Yeah. And I think there's an angle we should not forget.
We should start tracking about the waste plastic waste that we throw away with all our takeaways. That's, I think, becoming urgent before.
You can do that as well. Absolutely.
Yes. Before I ask my last round of questions, I just want to remind our audience here and online. In a few minutes, we will open the floor to questions. So we encourage everyone to participate in our discussion. So, Theo, I want to come back to you because we were talking about investors and their willingness to invest in this. I'm sure, your story is encouraging because you're expanding meaning a lot of capital is still coming into the eco-city. So tell us a bit more about your plan to expand. What's the next phase? You want to become a hub for innovation, is that right?
Yeah. The eco-city is 30 square kilometers. We have developed half of it. And in terms of the vision that we set out in early days to build a harmonious, livable environment where people can live, work, and play, I think we have achieved that quite well. So I'm thinking of expanding the role of the eco-city to beyond that. We started as the green sustainable city, but I think we can do more in view of the fact that both Singapore and China have got decarbonization goals. In China, we have the 30-60 goals, the dual carbon goals, and in Singapore, we also have carbon neutrality goals by the middle of the century. And I think given that there will be a lot of new technologies, new startups, companies that are developing new solutions for the new low carbon economy, be it technology in terms of new types of renewable energy or new ways of producing renewable energy, or energy storage systems, or carbon capture technologies, and so on and so forth. We thought that it will be a good extension for the eco-city to become a place whereby you can do more research and even manufacturing of new products and solutions that will lead to a low-carbon world. And that requires building the ecosystem, meaning you need to have an ecosystem to attract talent, to attract the necessary manpower, to have the VCs as investors, to have the right regulatory environment, to have the test bedding facilities and places, and so on. So I'm hoping in discussion with the various government authorities to build up this ecosystem so that in time, companies will find that it is natural to set up their first operations in the eco-city and contribute to the decarbonization efforts of both countries and in fact the world.
That's very encouraging. I think, Stuart, we've just found you a potential investor and perhaps a potential customer at Regal Hotels. So we'll open the floor to questions. Okay, this gentleman here.
My name is Dan. I'm a tech pioneer of the forum's innovator community, similar to Stuart here. I'm a CEO of Butler, MIT spin-off, doing occupancy sensors for buildings. So post-pandemic, we probably serve a lot of Fortune 500, with measuring the occupancy in their commercial buildings. So the result is super shocking. A lot of great commercial buildings are single-digit occupancy rate. And then to that really triggered me to think, frankly, we talk about plastic, which is a poster child for waste, but sadly, the concrete is actually 10x bigger waste of plastic. So today's theme is about better living, no waste. So it's probably easier for plastic container product, but super hard for building as a product. So just similar to what Ms. Lowe said, probably more virtual hotels. But my question here is that regarding that, how do we potentially reduce building as a product to reduce waste? This is a question for Ms. Lowe and also Teal.
Okay.
I think that's a great question because in Asia, buildings actually account for up to 60% of carbon emissions compared to 30% in the West, mainly because of weather conditions. For example, in Hong Kong, it's very hot and humid. We experience winter indoors when it's actually sweltering hot outside. So I think obviously it has to do with behavioral choice as well. We don't necessarily need this kind of air conditioning for optimal functioning. But of course, I think it boils down to, firstly, commitment from the real estate developers to pledge to transition. So for that, there are lots of technology inventions out there that can make a huge difference in terms of energy management. Smart building systems can help a lot. Digital twins can help us, spot potential problems and also and see real time, the carbon emissions and where the problems are, so that we can actually fix them before actually a lot of wastage is already, a lot of harm has already been done. And then secondly, I think it has to do with we have to get everyone to work together so that we can provide fertile ground for green buildings. For that to happen, I think we definitely need to foster collaboration and partnerships between the real estate, private sector, academia, as well as government. So I think for that to happen, we have to also establish the right standards, invest in research, interdisciplinary research to set the right standards and measurements so that we know exactly what we're striving to achieve. Then we can actually measure along the way our progress. The government obviously needs to play a stronger role in providing very solid incentives, especially in an era of volatile market conditions when everyone is struggling with the surge in interest rates. When it's a matter of survival, it's hard to prioritize sustainability. So the government definitely needs to provide more tax incentives. For example, if you adopt PropTech or if you use green building materials, could you perhaps provide a bit of incentives in terms of the plot ratio, or could you facilitate the approval process so that developers can actually be incentivized to act quickly. And then the banks, we have to work together to actually define exactly what a green bond should entail. I think going forward, all building loans should be green. So we shouldn't have a category for green loans because that ought to be a requirement. And academia, I think we also have to work to support them because, professors, scientists, they ought to focus on R&D. So we have to, as the private sector, come in as their commercial partner to help them pilot, commercialize, and scale.
Till, you want to chip in?
Two perspectives. First is as a consumer of products like concrete. As a developer, we use a lot of concrete, obviously. So all the buildings in the eco-city are green, 100% green buildings. So in our buildings, we have to think of passive design to make better use of light and keep the heat in and so on, so insulation and so on. So we do all of that, and solar panel and so on and so forth. Maybe geothermal power and so on. So we do that as much as we can to reduce carbon emission, and that's as a consumer. The second perspective will be as the creator of this environment. And we hope to create an environment whereby companies can start to develop new building materials, new types of concrete and so on and so forth, so that in the future there will be a concrete that is low carbon emitting and so on and so forth. So that's what we can do as a consumer and as a creator of the overall environment.
Can I just add one thing?
Sure.
Right.
Briefly.
I recently saw a statistic in Japan that 9,000 elementary schools are abandoned now. They're shut down because there aren't kids to fill them.
Population.
And so what we're trying to work with on the government is to try to create community centers out of these unused real estate projects where we can integrate both food production and education in an environment where instead of destroying the building or just leaving it abandoned, that we can repurpose it. So I think kind of this recycling a building is not maybe kind of a very big topic, but trying to find alternative uses for these things is something that we're also looking into from a food perspective as well.
That's an excellent point. Thank you for raising that question. I think it's a good contribution to our overall discussion. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I'm just going to wrap up really quickly. Thank you, everyone, for your insights, for your sharing with your, successes and challenges, making real progress in sustainable growth. So I'm now going to pass the floor to Kim Hui Neal, who's the Managing Director, Center for Nature and Climate, World Economic Forum, to share the commitment and program of your branch of the web. Thank you.
Thanks, Ong Fang. I'll keep my comments very brief because I know we are out of time. And thank you for facilitating a very interesting conversation. I thought I'll just share some reflections hearing from the panelists. One is that I think waste is a long overdue subject or opportunity, right? And it's in fact a low-hanging fruit. Right, and there was a lot of talk around food, right? If you look at food systems, it accounts for 1/3 of global emissions, 1/3. That's a lot, right? And about 50% of these emissions is due to wastage, right? And if you have heard from the panelists, and they come from different sectors and with different expertise, it is actually one where everyone can actually play a part. You can actually act on food waste at the individual level, at the entity level, right? But also through partnerships, right? Public-private partnership, or even collaboration with local communities, harnessing technology, right? At the forum, what we thrive on is really helping to build this multi-stakeholder dialogues. We've got work around food, water, resource use, right? And to the last comments earlier, it's not just about usage, it's also about how to better utilize, right, and steward the resources that we have. We know we're using close to 2 planet Earths today. We're borrowing from our children and their children. And if we can actually just think about waste and how we can actually cut to zero waste, if not even just halve it, right, we will be closer to where we need to be in terms of net zero, nature positive, better living futures. So on that note, thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Just a big round of applause to all of you. Thank you.